Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first day of the Governor's Office of Disability Affairs Conference. This is our last session of the day, last but not least. We will be hearing from Dustin Chandler, who is the president and co-founder of the Interaction Advisory Group, and they specialize in training law enforcement and other first responders on safe interactions with people with autism and developmental disabilities. Dustin's complete bio is at the link to all the presenters' bios. And Dustin, whenever you're ready, I will let you take over.
Sounds good. Thank you, Bambi. First, let me say thank you to the Governor's Office of Disability Affairs for asking us to present today. Want to really thank you guys for that. And thank you for everybody that is still here for the last. I did not know I was last till I read the agenda. So I am standing in between you and going home or doing whatever you want to do after this. So but we're going to give you some good information. So thanks to the Governor's Office of Disability Affairs for inviting us on. I'm going to share my screen and make sure that works. Sometimes that does. Let's make sure that it does. We are working on it. Stand by. I'm assuming it's not showing anything yet, eh? No?
Not yet, but you should have access to share.
Let's see. All right, we should be getting close. Let's see. Let's see if can everybody see a community awareness program, a CAP, orange
Yes.
screen?
Yes, sir.
Hey, score. Thank goodness. All right. So my name, like Bambi said, my name is Dustin Chandler. I'm with Interaction Advisory Group. We were founded in 2015 to really address, when we founded the company in 2015, we were looking at what I would say are some deficiencies in law enforcement training. My background is in law enforcement. I was a police officer for approximately 10 years. And worked most of my time in patrol. Got to do a lot of cool things in police work in the patrol unit. Got to spend a lot of good time on some specialty units, SWAT teams, some street crimes unit. Had a good time in law enforcement. And so I come from a law enforcement background. In 2011, my daughter was born. In 2012, my middle child, Carly, was diagnosed with a severe developmental disability called CDKL5 deficiency disorder. So that in her birth, we were blessed with Carly, but she has developmental disabilities, and that introduced me as a father, as a parent, and as a person to the disability community as a whole. And as I was introduced to more families, more individuals, looking back at my law enforcement background, I had since gotten out of law enforcement due to a lot of things going on. And I realized, there's really a lot of information in really the disability community as a whole, and things in patrol and police work that maybe they don't know yet, maybe they don't understand. I'm very transparent about my career. I did not know a lot of the stuff that we train police now. I did not get that kind of training back then. And so we founded this company to really bridge the gap on law enforcement, first responders, fire departments, medics, the whole group, and give them better understanding on interactions with individuals with developmental disabilities to help them have better outcomes. These are the things that we train on that side. We want the best possible outcome for law enforcement or first responder and the citizen. It's all about safety in our training. And so that is what our company is about, is training those on the first response side of things to understand developmental disabilities, disabilities kind of as a whole, and help them understand that some of these interactions, not all, some of these interactions could be different. How do we keep things safe? How do we ensure fair treatment of individuals? And how we go about doing that on each individual interaction. We're big on the interaction itself. When an officer or first responder is interacting with an individual, that is really what we focus on. So when we did that, we wanted to also talk to community members. We wanted to kind of develop a short class we could send community members through that would help them also learn the law enforcement first response side of things and how to kind of be prepared for some of those interactions. And so we decided to kind of have a two-way training street. So we are training I want everybody to understand that we are training law enforcement is a really big focus for us, but also fire department, medics, a whole lot of people. We are training them on safe interactions with individuals with disabilities and developmental disabilities. So none of this today should be saying, well, we're only training community, because we're training both sides. We want a better understanding. I feel having a background in law enforcement, if we have better understanding of each other, I sure hope that we can have the safest outcomes that we can and continue to have those. So that is what we will be presenting today, is kind of the how to be prepared, not necessarily for a disaster, but maybe be prepared for coming into contact with law enforcement, what to expect from law enforcement, kind of how to be prepared before any of these things happen. So I'll be touching on several different things today, trying to fit it in here in an hour. I told Bambi I would do it in an hour. So we're going to get a lot of things in this hour, and I'll provide you our website at the end. You can check out some of the things that are free to download from our website that you'll see throughout the program this afternoon. So that was a really quick introduction. I always have to mention the Louisiana Developmental Disabilities Council. This is just a slide that stays in our community trainings wherever we go in Louisiana. We have been very blessed to have funding coming from them to be able to be in Louisiana to do virtual trainings for first response. So I always have to give them a big thanks whenever we do this, because without them, we wouldn't be in Louisiana doing the things that we're doing that I just talked about. So thank you all to them for the funding and for allowing us to hopefully have better interactions with law enforcement. So as we start, these are all general things to kind of think about when interacting with law enforcement. I'm going to talk a lot about law enforcement because that's my background. And that's sometimes the most nervous people are when dealing with law enforcement. So that's going to be, it's kind of going to be heavy on talking about law enforcement. And when we talk about law enforcement and any kind of interaction, really with a police officer or with, it could be first responders of any kind, fire department, medics, whomever it could be. This form is something we talk about disclosure a lot in our class. It was my experience as a police officer that if I knew most about the person I was going to be dealing with, or that if I had to respond to their home, it was a lot better for me to understand more about what might be taking place with that individual. What I might be getting into that I should be aware of. Nothing against anything of a household, but if I knew that information before I got there, it would really make things run a lot smoother because I would have that information. So we put together a POW form, and this kind of sets the stage of disclosure, what we're going to talk about. I'm a believer in allowing law enforcement, first responders, the voluntary information that you want them to know about you or your loved one before those interactions take place. This is information that is voluntarily done. You don't have to do it, but this is good information for police officers to have, for medics to have. for a lot of people to have in first response. And don't misunderstand this information on what you would give people that you don't know. This is not information you would give strangers. This is information that you would give in emergency situations where the first responders can interact with you safer, understand some of the challenges that you may have and your family may have. That's what we want them to know up front. Of course, you can tell them as you go, but if law enforcement and first responders know this up front, it just kind of makes hopefully will make the interaction go a lot smoother and a lot safer. So all this information we call it a PAL form, a personal action list. It's voluntary information. So you really would only put down on this form what you would want law enforcement or other first responders to know. And you can see the form there on your screen. We have these on our website. As I said, I will give you our website link at the end. You can download as many of these as you want, but it's vital information about a loved one. So if it's a child, if it's your loved one, or if you're a caregiver, whomever it might be, or it might just be about you, if you live on your own, you may want to write this stuff down where it is easily accessible. If you have to call 911, you could keep it printed at your house. We always recommend keeping this information written down and have it readily accessible at your home to hand to police officers if they have to come to your house, if that's able to be done. Also, we would suggest for both police and medics, a lot of times in your jurisdiction, in your area where you live, you are in a city or part of a parish that will have a dispatch. So when you call 911, they are going to send out whomever needs to be responding to your house. They also need to know this information. So this information can be written on these PAL forms, these personal action lists, and you can turn these forms into your parish sheriff's office, your municipality, the city police department, wherever you may live. Fill this out and volunteer this information to them. Now, they do not go and broadcast this out to the public. That is not what this is. This would be for in-house information. They would then be able to flag what they call flagging the address that you have on that list. And it allows them, when they dispatch to your home or to your wherever you are, they will know this information before they get there. We hope that dispatch would then see this information. They would get it to the patrol officer and or the other first responders, and they will have this information. And it's voluntarily done. And it just really just puts out these things that they may need to know. Some of the things on our personal action list may or may not pertain to you, but I think it is very important to have this stuff written down about your loved one or about yourselves and turn it in where they'll know before they get there. And as I mentioned previously, I think it's important to keep a copy of this at your house. I think it's important to keep a copy of this tucked away somewhere, maybe in your glove box in your vehicle, that if anything happens, that if a caregiver is, unfortunately, if you're in a car wreck and your caregiver cannot talk or they're incapacitated for some reason, the officers or the first responders could find this information about a loved one, and they'll have that there, and they won't have to do a lot of searching and knowing who to call during an emergency and what medical diagnoses that you may have or that your loved one has. So we think it's important to keep these, to keep them in your house. I think it's important to turn these into your 911 call centers, so to speak. The people that when you call 911 to have them, and that is easily done by knowing your address. Obviously, if you're in a parish, you would just go to your parish sheriff's office. You could do that regardless if you're in a city or a part of the parish. You can go to both. And you would turn one in to the parish sheriff's office and ask them to enter that in for your home address. And you could even ask them to enter it in wherever they think that they may need it. And you could also do that for the municipality. This is one of the very basic ways that you guys, and I've done this myself personally at my home, that you can really be prepared and have law enforcement and other first responders prepared before they get to your house. Very good information to have. Some of you may be saying, in your location, that the police and the first responders already have a program like this. That is wonderful if they do. Many departments do not. But if they have a program already like this, a lot of times it's online. You can go fill this out so you can check out your city's website and police department. If they don't have that, then print these out from our website if you'd like. And then go to them and ask them to enter that into to their dispatch if they're ever dispatched to your house. Again, police departments also have some other tools called Smart 911. They may already have systems that are going like this. You can always inquire about those things, but I feel it very important to take the proactive step to fill out these PAL forms and let them know some of the situations that they may encounter with your loved one, like my daughter. My daughter is nonverbal. Well, that's what I want police to know. I want the police officers, if they ever have to respond to my house, hopefully they do not. But if they do, my daughter is nonverbal, and she's also non-ambulatory. So if my daughter can't walk, the fire department that would come to my house, they know exactly where my daughter's bedroom is because I've specifically told them to mark it. And to understand that somebody is in that bedroom, obviously, and to get them out, and she can't get herself out. So it's just good information to know. Back in law enforcement days, if I knew about somebody and I knew their likes and dislikes, man, that was such a great thing that I would know. And we can have a conversation before we have to do if you call 911, we can get to know each other maybe a little bit better. That's kind of how we train police now in our training, is build a rapport with the people that you serve. Obviously, if you're there on a 911 call, a lot of emergency things going on, but understanding who you're serving and knowing what challenges that they may have, it's just really good to know for really everybody involved. So we highly suggest doing those things. The recent photo, if you want to fill one of these out for your child, obviously a recent photo, as a person gets older, they change in their younger years, especially. So we would love to keep that recent photo, every 3 to 6 months, updating that photo. But always having a recent photo is very important because they can put that photo out onto the for the law enforcement, especially if there's a missing person. They would have an updated photo. And really everything that you see on that form is very important, especially de-escalation techniques. If you have those things, please put those on there where they'll understand that. We're big about caregiver involvement. Please put down caregivers. If there's only one caregiver, we understand that. If you're your caregiver, that's fine too. Put that information down there. Those are just important people that would be able to help out the situation if there's an emergency situation. So these can be found, again, we'll show you our website's down there on the bottom, but I will talk about our website again toward the end of the program here to make sure you can print those out if you feel necessary to turn those in. But it's good information to have, and you should check with your local agency to see if they have their own programs started. If they do, participate in that one. If they don't, print these out and turn those in. We just think it's very important to have that information and for them to have that knowledge going into a situation. Keeps everything safer. And that's our number one goal. So when we talk about all these things, it's really across the board, almost the same in all these columns. It's really the same for police as it would be for medics. We don't ever want to forget medics because they may respond with the police department, or law enforcement may call the medics to your house. We are big, Interaction Advisory Group is big on team. We are a team mentality. We want the law enforcement officers to know. We also want the fire department to know too, because they could be responding together. And I will tell you, it's not often that you will have the same information being dispatched to both police and fire at the same time. Some agencies are really good at it. Some agencies, they don't really have the same information coming to them. So it's good to let each one of them know these things. And people with sensory influences and sensory sensitivities, that is obviously a big thing to let people know about. So make sure you're telling not only law enforcement, I would say also tell fire medics. It can be done at one trip to the department to dispatch, and it'll cover both. But if it doesn't, ask them, listen, I want this, put in the system and flag my home address and let them know that information, but then ask them also for the fire service as well. And one thing you can ask them is, hey, do you guys dispatch fire service as well? And if they say they do, well, then ask them to make sure that's obviously over on their system, but make sure they're both. We're all on the team together, I feel, and everybody needs to know these things, okay? We're, again, you will hear me say this more than once today. We're very big on caregiver involvement. Caregivers are very important to us, and a caregiver could mean a lot of different people. We even consider siblings caregivers in an emergency situation. So if it is your sibling that can help out law enforcement, can help out medics with you or a loved one, we want them to be listed. Again, this is not public information. This would be in emergency situations. We want them to know this information, because if we can find somebody that can help law enforcement help you, then we want to make sure that those people are linked up to have a real good outcome and the best possible outcome that we can have. So you'll probably hear me say caregiver again. We want the caregiver to be involved with that. Tracking technologies, obviously, if you have a child or a loved one that could wander, we talk about wandering a little bit later as well. But on those PAL forms, make sure you list out any kind of tracking technology that you may have incorporated in your safety plans. We talk about these in a minute, but make sure those are on PAL forms, especially if you think you have somebody that will run or is a wanderer or have that information down. And have it done beforehand. All this information today, especially when we talk about PAL forms and information disclosure information, it is very important to know this should be done before, I feel, before you may have an interaction with law enforcement. Obviously, if you don't have it done and you have to call 911, they need to know this information. However, if we could have it done before, because you're thinking clearly now, it's not in an emergency situation, you're thinking clearly, you have time to slow down and get your thoughts on paper. That is a great time to do it when we're not under stress. And the tracking technologies is one of these things that if your child goes missing and they've wandered and they've got out of your house, I am a parent of 3 children, and if any of my children are out of the house, I'm going to panic. So I may be in a state of mind that I won't remember the tracking technology. I may forget about it. I may forget a lot of things because I'm under a panic and I've lost a loved one. They're missing. Well, let's have that written down beforehand. And man, you can just hand that sheet over to law enforcement. Maybe you've turned it in and they know what tracking technology that you have. There's a lot of different tracking technologies out there. We'll talk about in a second. There's different ones, but let's make sure to have a game plan going forward that we're turning in information that we want to make sure that they know to help us before an emergency. That's kind of the key here, is to have this already done prior to an emergency situation with law enforcement or even fire medics. On the other column, we talk about schools just a little bit in these community trainings. We understand that parents and obviously they may have kids in school. Again, we are a team-based kind of approach with our training. School resource officers are out there. They're in schools. They're not in every school, but they're in a lot of schools. We want the school resource officer to understand the same information a regular police officer might know, because they're a police officer that has had school resource officer training and they're inside your child's school. I would love for them to understand more about your child. I understand there's FERPA and there's a lot of things that come into play when you're talking about IEPs and special education if they have an IEP. However, I think it's important when we're talking about health or safety that we make sure everybody is on the same team, that they understand that if there's an emergency situation and the SRO has to respond to that, no matter what that emergency situation is, that the police officer, the school resource officer, understands kind of what's going on. A lot of times our school resource officers may not know the students yet, and they may interact in a way that was not the best to interact with, and we could have done it better, but they just didn't have the information. So I always put a question mark, should a plan be in the student's IEP? Obviously, there's behavioral intervention plans, BIPs, that are planned that really don't involve the school resource officers a lot of times. But it's just good to have everybody on the same team. And that is something that if you have a child that is in special education in your schools, and they have an IEP, that is something that you can discuss with the IEP team. I think it's a very important discussion to have, that if something happens at school, it may not be a law enforcement issue. However, law enforcement, the school resource officer may respond to the classroom and or the situation. So we want everybody to be on the same page. And I'll leave that up to parents and or the caregivers. When you're creating these IEPs, ask these questions and make sure everybody's on the same page. Again, I put in the little asterisk there about sensory sensitivities and influences that may impact behavior. It is good for school resource officers to know that. And also obviously the teachers, it is good to let everybody know and get them on the same team before an incident may happen in our schools. So that's why we put that other column there. School resource officer, again, is the same as a police officer. They just had school resource training, officer training, and they're in a lot of the public schools and some private schools as well. So just keep that in mind, get everybody on the same page, and where we'll understand what we may be encountering before they get there, and they can help your student out. The self-advocate and caregiver interactions with police. Listen, this is all just general information. When you're interacting with law enforcement, this is law enforcement specific. I was in law enforcement a long time, and I have pulled over, I don't know how many cars, and if I've interacted with hundreds, if not thousands of people in a law enforcement capacity. And these are just some of the things that I, during my career, would say to have best safe interactions. These are just some of the tips, and some of you might say, well, that's, that's obvious, but sometimes we just have to think and know what to prepare for if you're interacting with law enforcement. And really the first one is following lawful orders of police officers. This is one of these things that if we can comply, a lot of times obviously the call should go a lot smoother. You're doing what the police officer is asking you to do on a lawful command. And you're doing those things. That obviously is going to, let's hope that gets a good response from the police officer. It should. It always has with me. If somebody complied with what I was asking them to do, I never had any issues from my side. And if you're pulled over, we talk about traffic stops a lot. A lot of people will drive by a traffic stop. And I had this question many times when I was in law enforcement. And they asked me, why are there so many police officers around just one car, one vehicle? What's going on? Is there something else going on there? I mean, there could be, but don't be alarmed. I mean, a lot of these times officers will respond to kind of back up their officer because they don't know the situation. That doesn't mean, that does not necessarily mean that you were in any kind of trouble. They could just be there for backup purposes. We want people to understand that. That there could be more than one officer present, and they could be on each side of your vehicle. There's a lot of things that other officers could be there for. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're in trouble or anything like that. It is something that is really, when I was in law enforcement and continue today with friends in law enforcement, that's kind of common practice to back each other up because they don't know who might be in the vehicle or what's going on, and they're just helping each other out. It's important to also know if you get a ticket, or if an officer or if an action is taken, even in an arrest, anything, but really let's just hope nobody's getting arrested. But if you get a ticket, it's just important not to argue with the police officer on the side of the road. The police officer is more than likely not going to change their mind when that takes place. And if you don't agree, it doesn't mean you have to agree with the ticket. But there's a process by which you can contest a ticket, which you can contest a lot of things, and we encourage our self-advocates. We encourage this who we work with, and then the caregivers as well. We encourage to go about that process to challenge something that you don't agree with, such as a traffic ticket, a violation on a traffic ticket. Now, when you do that, obviously you're going to go to a municipal court or a local court, and you need to bring a caregiver or a loved one. Make sure that you understand the process, because it is a different process, and make sure you're prepared for that. And I encourage that. I would encourage people, if I wrote some tickets that some people didn't agree with, and if they showed up to court and wanted to contest, it's really you. That's your time to talk. That is your time with your caregiver, or you will have to contest the officer's ticket or the action. And that's important, because if we know that there is a process set up, there is a system set up for that, it is much better and safer to do that in that system and not on the side of the road, because that can be very dangerous for you and the police officer, and we want to keep things safe. All right, and when you get pulled over, if you're encountered in a vehicle, I was asked a lot of times, where's the best place for your hands and everything. I would say, if you're pulled over by a police officer, best place, they want to see your hands. Okay, police officers want to see your hands, and one of the easiest places to keep them is going to be on top of the steering wheel, if that's easy for you. Keep them on top of the steering wheel, and don't move them unless the officer asks you a question. We go over that in a minute, how to answer questions. But keep those hands where police officers can see them. There's nothing that made me more nervous as a police officer when I was a police officer than when people were trying to reach under their seat or in their middle console. That makes a police officer very nervous. They don't know what's in the vehicle. So keep your hands where they can see them, and just don't move them. And you can have a conversation, obviously, with them seeing your hands. That was a big thing for me as a police officer, was being able to see somebody's hands. And that's just very important. So I think it's easiest to keep them on top of the steering wheel. You can just place them on top of the steering wheel with your wrist on top of the steering wheel. You can also, another suggestion sometimes comes up that you can, when you're being pulled over, you can roll down the windows where the officer can see everything in the vehicle fairly easily, obviously weather permitting, of course. But it's important just to have your hands where the officer can see them on any kind of traffic stop that you may be involved with. But really, any kind of interaction, police want to know where your hands are. We put on the very bottom of this, officers can be very direct. I was a very direct police officer when I was working. It can be misinterpreted as being very rude, but just remember, police officers can be very direct. We have an advisory board that has police officers that sit on our advisory board for our company, and this was one of the things that they wanted people to understand is, yes, they're direct. They're not trying to be rude. It's just they're just very direct in what they're wanting people to do. So, not misinterpreting that as being rude is something I think they feel important for us to say. And so we say it. And I was a very direct police officer. And I'm pretty sure that sometimes people thought I was rude, and I was not trying to be rude. I was just being very direct. So just keep that in mind. With all this as well, if you are a self-advocate, and sometimes we have disclosure cards. I know some of the autism societies have them around the country. Even other organizations and affiliates have identification cards, even your driver's license. Any of these identification cards that you, obviously, if it's your driver's license, to be able to, you're going to have to show that to the police officer. Wait till the police officer asks you for that identification. That is important. I would wait for the kind of the direction to come from the police officer. We train a lot of self-advocates in the autism community, and a lot of times they get really, they know that they want to show an ID card to the officer, and they really want to get that to the officer. And sometimes if you're doing it too soon and start reaching in your pockets, it makes police a little bit nervous. So wait for the police officer to ask you for your ID and or your driver's license. And when they ask you for that, you can give them your driver's license and the other information that they're asking for. And if you have a disclosure card, and the disclosure card would be somewhat like the things we talked about earlier, but it could be saying, identifying the disability that you may have or the things that you want them to know on a little bitty card. That's the time to present that to an officer. To wait till they ask for your driver's license, and then just put that card with your driver's license and hand it to them. You can also tell the officer what you're going to do. They'll obviously listen to you. Hey, I'm going to reach here. My wallet is in my purse, or my wallet is over here, and then ask them if it's okay to retrieve it. That just makes things go a little bit smoother and safer as well. One of my favorite sayings when I was a police officer is the next bullet point here, and that was answer questions with your mouth, not your hands. That is something I said over and over. It is natural. It is a natural reaction when somebody asks you a question that if you have something, well, you want to show it to them. That's everybody does that. Well, just remember to make sure your hands are always visible. And then if they ask you a question, a yes or no question, then answer your mouth. Don't try to show them something that they ask you about. Just answer with your mouth, not your hands. I know it's maybe sounds silly and it's understood, but a lot of people will want to reach for things. And just remember, the police officer does not know what's inside that vehicle. So if you go reaching around the inside of that vehicle, it might make them a little bit nervous, and we want to have the best possible outcome we can have. So if they ask you about something, yes or no, and then tell them where something is. If you're looking for your driver's license, I do have a driver's license. It is located in my wallet, which is wherever it is. If a caregiver is with you, you can allow, obviously, the caregiver to interact with the law enforcement officer as well, and just let them know where all these things are before you go reaching for them. It just makes the interaction go a little bit safer, especially on traffic stops. And that is really my first, that is personal experience. I always got nervous if I couldn't see somebody's hands. So just make sure that's the case. And we're not reaching for anything without telling the officer what you might be reaching for when they ask. We went over the identification card and the disclosure card. We encourage self-advocates and anybody with certain things that officers may need to know and understand. We find it very helpful for having these disclosure cards. These aren't cards that you would give to everybody. These are in emergency situations or a traffic stop that you want them to know. And on those disclosure cards would tell about the disability or the stuff that you want them to know. And on that identification cards, again, we think it's important to have caregivers involved. We understand that caregiver is not going to go with everybody. I understand that. I didn't want my parents or my loved ones riding with me everywhere. I get that. But on that disclosure card, have contact information of somebody that may be able to help you or help that police officer. It's very good information to have. But then let's remember when to give that card. That is something we've got to understand, that give that disclosure card when you're giving your driver's license after you were asked by the police officer. But having that caregiver on there, that could help you really big, and it could also help that officer. We want the officers to be asking about a caregiver, because if there's communication difficulty, a caregiver might know how best communication techniques, and that can help the officer out and that can help the individual out. And that's very key in our opinion. Keeping hands out of your pockets. If you're standing up talking to a police officer and if they ask you to take your hands out of your pockets, I used to say that all the time. That's, again, going back to what we've already talked about. It makes police officers very nervous when they can't see your hands, or if your hands are in your pockets. You can keep your arms out of your pockets to your side. You can put them kind of up here, kind of fold your hands when you interact with a police officer, but making sure they can see your hands at all times is very, very important. And that's from personal experience. To keep them out of your pockets, it makes officers nervous. I always say, I try to tell everybody this, and it doesn't matter who you're interacting with, in my opinion. Be polite and respectful. Be kind. Hopefully that kindness is given back to you. Obviously, that's what I would say. Anybody that was always kind to me, it's just good when you run across kind people. And I know we've got kind people on this call. I know we've got polite police officers out there. Be kind to one another. I say that to anybody, though. It's just being polite and respectful. And we say that on the police officer training too, is we come in contact with families. Listen, my family, we deal with developmental disability every day, and it can be tough. Dealing with disabilities as an individual can be tough, and you're going through a lot. We tell police officers to have an understanding of that. Be polite and understand kind of the perspective that individuals with disabilities are coming from, but also their parents. So when they come in contact with you, it works both ways. Politeness and respectfulness works both ways. And I just want everybody to know that that's what we teach in our training class for police and the other first responders. We're also big on the sense of community. The caregivers, parents, and self-advocates, and anybody that you want to take a visit to the local PD. People always say, well, that's for children to do, and that's not really true. I mean, if you haven't never been to a police department, I mean, get to go know the people that may serve you, that may come to your house to help you. Get to know those people. Call up and be proactive. A lot of times police departments, they may not be proactive in this. We want them to be. But if they're not doing it, on the community side, let's call them up, call them on the phone and ask if you and your family can take a tour of the police department or the fire department. I'm a big believer that if we can get to know each other and understand each other before emergencies take place, then there's better outcomes that can be had. I'm a big believer in that. And sometimes on the community side of things, even though we encourage it on the law enforcement and first responder side, it sometimes takes us as a community to reach out to them and say, can we come and meet some police officers, and can we come and look at a patrol unit? I mean, I drove in a patrol unit all the time, and when people wanted to see and somebody wanted to, see that, we'd always set that up for them to have it, and they can do that, but they'd have to set that up under safe conditions, obviously. But take a visit to a local PD and know the people that are serving you. It's important to know, when I was a police officer, I was serving the community. I was serving the people that lived in the communities that I worked in, and we need to get to know each other. And sometimes that takes the community on our side, the community to reach out to them. So we always encourage that. We encourage it on the law enforcement side too, is, hey, be proactive and have community days. Why not have community days where you can have a day where the public can get to know the people that are serving them? We think that's very vital in getting to understand each other. We are big on acceptance. We're big on awareness as well, but I am very big on acceptance. And if we can get to know each other, no matter what line of work this is, if it's police work, if it's any other work, if we can become aware of things that are going on, we want that to lead to acceptance in our society for my child, for my daughter, and for everybody else. So I think that leads to that kind of acceptance when we know the people that are working for us and serving us in that capacity. All right, we talk about wandering. Let me make sure I didn't skip a slide. I did not. We talk about wandering because wandering can be a big issue. We know in autism, but it could be a big issue for a lot of other developmental disabilities. And wandering is a really a big issue because it's very dangerous, of course. So we talk about this in general senses. We know in autism that it's very high. We know in other conditions it can be high too. So what can we do about wandering and be safe? And some of these things you may already know. Don't get in the thought process that this wandering only occurs in little children. I mean, statistics show that it happens there, but it also happens in adults and also with teenagers, adolescents, and sometimes it will happen with your child that is very independent, doing things, but they're living with you, and they may just wander off. Or this just happened not too long ago in my local area, and they had never left the house before, and then they left and they didn't know what to do, and he was found at a Walmart at 3 a.m, about 4 miles down the road. So we love going over this because it's just general knowledge for you to know and put in the top of your mind on how to prevent and what if wandering takes place. Again, we talked about it in autism. I mean, listen, in autism, it's very, it happens, and about 49% of the children diagnosed with autism will wander. That's half. So it's very important for that community to know, but it happens in other developmental disabilities. And listen, it happens in dementia, Alzheimer's, and other conditions like that. So this just isn't for autism, but it does happen frequently in autism. So please know that. And autism is a very large group. I mean, we call it an unknown phenomenon, why children or people will wander, but they do this. Obviously, statistics show that wandering in a 5-year study done by, it was actually the National Autism Association did a 5-year study and showed that wandering in autism in their study showed that it happened between 9 p.m. and 9 a.m. And that's overnight. So that's obviously a dangerous time, and it's an unknown phenomenon. I mean, we know the statistics about the drownings that we'll talk about and everything. it's unknown in the fact of why people will wander, and sometimes you just might not know that. We can always think about, they may be seeking or wanting something. They may be wanting to get away from a situation. I know studies have shown that wandering will often take place when there's a lot of commotion or stress going on in their life, and they may kind of wander off because they're in an unfavorable situation. So they may leave. And please don't get into the habit of thinking, well, my child, even if they're 20, my child has never done that. They are not going to do that. It could happen. Obviously, we pray that it won't happen, but it could. You may have heard of it called as elopement. And then there's also bolting. I just talked to a parent today, a child with Down syndrome, and he was a runner at one time, as she called it. A lot of parents, caregivers will call it runners. We just want you to be prepared, know that it's out there, and keep this at the top of your mind because it could be a life or death situation. Obviously, anytime at any place. It doesn't have to be from your house and they left your house. It could be a grandparent's house. It could be at a friend's house. And they just go wandering. So just be prepared at all times. That's kind of how you have to look at this topic. And obviously, if somebody does wander, you don't look at a single place. When we're talking about, don't always think that you're going to know. It's good information to know that if they've wandered before and they've been to a certain place, obviously that you can obviously tell rescue people and police that, hey, they've been here before. You may want to check it again, but don't always think they're going to go to a singular place. We had an instance that I was made aware of, that it was not autism, it was another condition, and this individual had wandered off, and his family said up and down that he was going to go to a certain location. So they really focused on that one location, and it ended up that he was really about a mile really in the opposite direction. So they may go to a single place a lot, but don't tell everybody that they're going to find them there, because that might not be the case. Don't think you'll always know. Obviously it happens pretty quick. We know that if they wander, obviously if it's happening in statistics for the autism community from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. a lot of the times, you may be asleep. Obviously that's a scary time. So, and it will happen quick, meaning they're out the door before you even know it. And we'll go over things on how to try to prevent that the best that you can. And just remember, even if it's a child and they wander, they can cover great distance in a short period of time. So this is not something you take lightly. If your child wanders or your loved one wanders, great distance can be covered in a very short period of time. So time is of the essence with that. We want to develop a plan. We're big about planning, if you can't tell, before these things happen. We want you to plan for emergency situations before they happen. If you think you're going to call 911, have things written down on your PAL form, your personal action list, and have it written down now. Don't wait for the stress to come. You really want that to be done first. So prepare, alert, and respond. And I'll go over this very quickly, but you want to be prepared in case they wander. Obviously, have your personal action list. We've gone over those today. The current photo, update it frequently. We talked about your emergency contact card. There's other programs. There was a yellow dot program in some states. Have those emergency cards with the child if at all possible. Have that emergency card with your loved one if you can, or at least have it at home to hand to the officers with the updated photo. And that's that personal action list again. But if you have a disclosure card, have that with your individual loved one, and where they'll keep it. You know your loved one the best, where they'll keep it. Sometimes that's not on a necklace or on a wristband. It could be somewhere else, and you may have to get creative with that. Develop your safety plan during IEP. This could happen during schools. Statistically, it has happened. May not happen a lot at school, but it has happened at schools. So make sure that they know that in the IEP plan that your child or your student, no matter what age, could wander. And then tracking technology, and make sure that that's updated. The alert, you need to remain alert at all times, but you need to also call 911 immediately. These are emergency situations. Parents will oftentimes, caregivers will oftentimes wait, and they want to look first. And I understand the immediate look. And if you don't find them then, call 911. Really, time is of the essence. We've got to be very quick on on that. Okay, so you need to alert the authorities as quickly as you can. We say involve the neighbors. Let them know. If you know your neighbors, let them know that this could happen, and if you see your loved one out, to call you immediately on an event to alert you for that. If you feel safe doing that. Obviously, on the school and daycare facilities, notifying them that those could happen. They may not understand wandering, and that's where they are most of the day. So know that the PAL forms you see there, again, we think they're important under the alert, and then the tracking technology is there as well. And then the response. Obviously, if you have a PAL form, you are set, you're ready, you've had it, you've done a great job filling these out. Police response to your house, hand that to law enforcement. They've got all the information that they're probably going to need. They may ask you additional questions, but they've got a whole bunch of stuff that they can use to locate your loved one. Then I would say, and you can put these on the PAL forms too, how best to approach a child or your loved one, letting them know certain things. Be prepared. I would do this in advance too. Be prepared that they could be canine search and rescues involved. I understand not all people like dogs. Sometimes that is the case, but we want officers and law enforcement, we want them to get canine search and rescue out immediately. I don't think that's the wait and let's see if we do it. I think that's a let's get the canines out first, because they can locate a lot quicker than humans. But just be prepared for that in the response that's going to come. The tracking technologies, you need to be aware of which one that you have it written down before. You may forget if your loved one is missing. And know anything else that you may want to tell medics or police officers that they're coming to your house. And a lot of times it's going to be police first. Know what to tell them and have that written down on that PAL form. Okay, so you got to develop a plan prior to these things taking place. That's very important. All right. Listen, when we talk about autism, it's just been very important to know drowning is a leading cause of death in autism. It's unfortunate there's a fatal attraction to water. That's swimming pools, that's bodies of water. Tell them to search bodies of water first in case they don't know. You guys should know where your bodies of water are. I think it's very important to know that for anybody, not just people that individuals with autism, but know the bodies of water. Just understand the areas of great height around your house. A lot of children and adults like areas of height and developmental disability. And we know that they will climb power poles and water towers and whatnot, to know that. And then pick places of danger. Understanding a lot of times certain people, not all, we know no two cases are the same. They may not understand danger the way everybody else does. And so we want people to be looking off the beaten path, so to speak. Again, this all should be put on a PAL form before an incident like this happens, okay? Going down a little bit, here's the tracking technology. Listen, these are just really quick things. You know the dangers of wandering, what might trigger wandering. You may understand that, but really it's them getting out of the house. Nothing may trigger it. They may just want to leave. It's if you have the ability to have an alarm put on your house where the door chirps when the door is open, that's good to have if you can do that. If you can also have cameras around the perimeter of your home, you can set up geofencing, and that also will help prevent that, or at least alarm you or alert you rather to when somebody is out of the house or around your house. And then the tracking technologies, there's several listed there. Project Lifesaver is a big one, but there's other GPS tracking devices like Angel Sense and some of the ones listed there. Just know that I think it's important that if you have a child that may wander, that we have tracking technologies, but you got to know what it is. You got to know all the information. And that, again, is before these things happen. But understand that some of this GPS tracking technology and everything may have a monthly fee. And that is something that you guys will have to decide if that's something that you can do. Project Lifesaver is one to look into with each individual parish and police department as well. Those are out there, but tracking technologies can save lives, and I highly suggest you look into those. All right, and I say, listen, become seizure first aid certified. My daughter has intractable epilepsy. There's nothing worse than a seizure. I hate them. Seizures are no good. I became seizure first aid certified because I thought it was important, even though I've been around seizures for the last 10 and a half years, because that's how old my daughter is. It's just good to know and understand seizures. They can happen in anybody. 1 in 10 people are going to experience a seizure probably in their lifetime. So get seizure first aid certified. I put it up here. It's just a good to have. It's free. It's about an hour and a half course you can take through the Epilepsy Foundation to get those things. I just think it's very important, just in case, to know that. All right, and then we say be proactive in your community. This is our website, and I know we're running short on time, but that is our website. Please write it down, interactionadvisorygroup.com. And you can go, it will be under Resources tab. And you can download as many of those PAL forms as you want to. And there's other state information there that talks about LACAN, that talks about partners in policymaking in your state. We want everybody to be involved. It's a team effort to create policies for the disability community, we feel. So there's a lot of information out there on our website. You can print off a lot of that. A lot of people don't know this, and we share it. That the ADA under Title II, I believe, covers law enforcement. That document is out there for you to review as well. We also have it out there for law enforcement to review as well too, under their responsibilities of ADA. So that is out there. So please visit our website. And we say be proactive. Get out there and get to know the people that are serving you, and hopefully they're going to get out and to know you as well. So I will toss it back to Bambi. I know I'm running right up on just maybe 5 more minutes. I will toss it over for any questions that anybody might have.
We had a question, let's see. Are these terms, and this was maybe a few minutes ago, are these terms euphemisms for running away? So like, I guess maybe when you're talking about elopement.
Yeah. So elopement, wandering, it's running away from a location. Bolting is another. Well, we were talking about runners running away from certain situations. Yeah. So the answer to that is yes. They're just different ways of saying really the same thing. If you have somebody that bolts, they're really running away from a certain situation, and that might happen really quick, right there standing by you. And wandering is really when somebody is leaving a situation or the house. It's really kind of the same thing. But if you hear any of those type of things, those are the things that are very important to know, that there's dangers out there and we need to find people safely.
Okay. Dustin, can you stop sharing your screen?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so that way people can see. Wait, you gotta
Did I stop?
No, you didn't stop it completely. Just go to, I think if you hit on share screen, you could do you wanna?
Oh, hang on.
If
Yep,
anybody
I'm
has
trying to get
questions,
back.
they can comment. Okay. So now people on YouTube can see who's been talking.
Oh, and I can go to the chat. Hey, look at there.
Okay. Any other questions? We just have a lot of comments of great information. Let's see, any other questions? That was very thorough. We really appreciate it, Dustin. You were right on time. That was great.
Hey, good. Maybe one of the first times in my entire life I've actually been on time. I'm proud of myself. Listen, please go to my website and contact us with any questions. Listen, we're here to be a source of the source. Bambi and all they're doing great things, and we can connect you to the right people. And please know that we are with the, again, I said it at the beginning, I want everybody to understand that the Developmental Disabilities Council has done great work, and we're getting to as many police departments and other first responder communities as we can. So we'll be actually in Louisiana, pandemic pending, of course. We'll be in Louisiana in September. So we're very excited about that, but we couldn't have done it without the Council on Developmental Disabilities. And again, thank you to the Governor's Office on Disability Affairs and you, Bambi, for inviting us on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we really appreciate this work that you're doing and the work that you're doing in the state. And thanks to the DD Council for funding this important work. families have really expressed their concern to ensure that our law enforcement and first responders understand the interactions with their loved ones with disabilities. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing that information with everyone who's in attendance. I just want to remind people in the schedule that you received, there's the link to all of our presenters' web pages. So as Dustin gave his link to their website, all of our presenters' websites are linked there. You also can get a link to everyone's bio. And thank you again, Dustin. And thank you everyone who has attended today. We've successfully made it through our first day, which I think all of our presentations have been wonderful. So we made it through 4 out of 18 sessions. And so we're just looking forward to continuing. Just want to remind everyone the sessions will start at 9 o'clock tomorrow, and you want to be logged in at 9 o'clock. We will have our own Lillian Dejean speaking about disability history and culture. And if you've heard Lillian speak, I know that you will want to be on for that. And the rest of the day is filled with great sessions with self-advocates and professionals sharing wonderful information. Thanks again to the staff, for Lillian and Jamor, and as well as our interpreters who are here from Deaf Focus. We appreciate your work and your talents in providing that to our attendees. And you all have a great evening, and we will see you tomorrow at 9 o'clock.